I thought I escaped when I left that house, when I slammed the door and swore I'd never go back. But last week, I heard my father's voice on the phone, and he knew exactly where I was.
If this made your day easier, make mine better with a quick like and subscribe. Thank you.
Parents of kids in lockup. What's the worst call you've ever gotten? Mine came out of nowhere. My phone rang, and the voice on the other end said my son was in the hospital. His skull had been fractured by his cellmate. They claimed it was some kind of gang fight that spiraled out of control. I remember gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white as I sped to the hospital. And when I got there, the sight that met me nearly broke me. My boy was lying in a bed, hooked up to machines, blood pooling inside his brain. A nurse whispered, "Prepare yourself for the worst." I sat in that waiting room with two thoughts pounding in my head. Would my son survive? And why were they lying? Neither he nor his cellmate had anything to do with gangs. When the doctor finally came out and told me my son was alive, I could have collapsed from relief. For 1 second, I felt like the luckiest father in the world. But that joy shattered when the doctor pulled me aside and said the bleeding had damaged the part of his brain that controls speech. My son couldn't talk anymore. He couldn't tell me he loved me. He couldn't tell me what really happened in that cell. And then, the doctor's voice got even quieter. The injuries weren't just on his head. There was old trauma inside his body. Trauma that had nothing to do with any so-called fight. The next morning, I marched into that detention center. Officer Bryant, the one who'd called me, was sitting at the front desk. "How's Caleb?" He asked like nothing was wrong. "He can't speak anymore." I shot back. "Jason really did that much damage?" Bryant didn't even flinch. "Fights get brutal in here." But I knew right then he was lying. Because Jason's mom had already shown me the paperwork. Her son had been in the lockdown unit since Sunday. He couldn't have been in my boy's cell. When I threw that in Bryant's face, his whole expression shifted. He jumped up so fast papers went flying off his desk. "She must be mistaken." That's when Jason's mother walked in, right on cue, and signed the visitor log in a loud, clear voice. "Here to see Jason Mitchell in lockdown unit B." Bryant's face went pale as snow. He'd been caught red-handed. And suddenly, I was dismissed, pushed out the door like trash. But that night, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. A woman's voice, barely above a whisper. "I heard about your boy. I work there. Tuesday nights, certain boys don't go to bed. They get taken to the counseling room. Your son was one of them." My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped the phone. Caleb's injuries had happened on a Tuesday night. The next day, I stormed into the warden's office. "My son was hurt on a Tuesday. I'm told he gets taken to counseling on Tuesdays. What's happening in that room?" Warden Sparks pulled out a folder, calm as ice. "Your son's intake forms show pre-existing conditions." I yanked the paper from his hand. The ink was so fresh it might have still been drying. And the signature? It wasn't mine. They were forging documents. "You're covering up sexual assault." I spat. His eyes narrowed. "That's a dangerous accusation. Be careful, Mr. Williams. Defamation of correctional staff is a crime." Walking out to the parking lot, I felt like I was losing my mind. But then a woman approached me. "They got your boy too." She pulled out her phone, showing me file after file. "My nephew Timothy, same brain injury 3 months ago. My sister's boy Dante, 6 months ago. I've tracked it. 17 boys in 2 years. All Tuesday nights. All lost their ability to speak. It's deliberate. They're silencing witnesses." I felt sick. Then she showed me one last message. Something Timothy had saved before he died. A boy inside had written, "Asterisk, there are hidden cameras in the counseling room. The warden keeps the recordings. Asterisk, we needed the police." But when I went to the station and dropped the names, the desk sergeant cut me off. "Henderson, Cole, Internal Affairs, all connected. Filing false reports against law enforcement is a felony. Stop now, or you'll end up in a cell next to your son." That's when I knew. Nobody was coming to help us. They were protecting each other. So that night, I called my brother Deshaun and my cousin James. Both had done time. Both knew how these places worked. "They're targeting kids, destroying their speech centers so they can't testify," I told them. "My boy's cousin works maintenance in there," Deshaun said. "Tuesday night, Bryant works alone." 3 nights later, we slipped in through the service door at 11 p.m. My heart was hammering so loud I was sure someone would hear it. And through the window of that counseling room, I saw him, Officer Bryant, standing behind a kid who couldn't have been more than 14, bent over the table. That was it. Deshaun kicked the door in. Bryant spun around, pants still half undone. The boy collapsed, sobbing. James scooped him up, wrapped him in his jacket, carried him out like he was his own son. Bryant lunged for his radio, but Deshaun smacked it away and shoved a phone in his face. "Start talking," he growled, recording everything. I'll never forget it. The blood streaming from Bryant's nose, the tears, the way he stammered when Deshaun asked about Caleb, about the other boys. "It's not just us," Bryant sobbed. "The warden sells the videos, hidden cameras. The judge buys them. Senator Davies. 50 grand a tape." My stomach turned. "You destroyed their speech centers on purpose?" The warden said, "If they can't talk, they can't testify." Henderson knew where to hit. targeted trauma to the brain. And the recordings? In the warden's office. Safe behind the family picture. Combination 0-7-1-5. Deshaun bolted. 20 minutes later, he came back holding a hard drive. His hands were trembling. Hundreds of videos. Every single one of them. I knelt down next to Bryant. My fists still ached, but I didn't care. I leaned in close, grabbed him by the collar, and whispered, "Are you ready?" The man broke down right there on the floor. Blood was running down his face, mixing with the snot and tears pouring out of him. His whole body shook as he looked up at me, desperate, like a cornered animal. What he was feeling in that moment was nothing compared to what our boys had been forced to endure. Deshaun kept the phone steady, capturing every second, while James stood guard at the door, eyes sharp on the hallway. I pressed harder. Who else? Who else besides the names you already gave us? Bryant's sobs turned to gasps. Finally, he choked out, "The Harden brothers. Officer Aaron Harden, Officer Caden Harden. They worked different shifts to cover more nights." My stomach twisted. 2 more predators protected by their uniforms. He said the warden decided who got sent to that so-called counseling room. They targeted kids who wouldn't be missed, boys without strong families, without lawyers, kids from homes like mine. And then I asked the one question that burned inside me. Why Caleb? Bryant sniffled, wiped his nose with the back of his hand, and answered, "They go through intake forms. Look for single parents, low-income addresses, no lawyer listed. Families who can't fight back." My hands trembled with rage. They'd put my son on a list because they thought we were powerless. Behind me, the rescued boy sat curled in the corner, still wrapped in James's jacket. His small body shook like a leaf in the wind. I went over, dropped to my knees, and softened my voice. "You're safe now. Nobody's ever going to hurt you again." He just nodded, too terrified to speak. That silence told me everything. Then Deshaun called me over, showing me what he'd pulled up on the hard drive through his phone. Hundreds of video files neatly organized by date. And next to each file, price tag, buyer initials, exactly the way Bryant had described. SD, Senator Davies, 50,000. JH, a judge, 30,000 each. My stomach turned as the reality sank in. These weren't just crimes. These kids were being sold like products. And then I saw it. The timestamp, the file from the Tuesday night my son was hurt. It was right there, sitting on that drive. My finger hovered over the screen, but I couldn't open it. Not yet. Not that one. We didn't have time to waste. Someone would notice Bryant missing from his post. And if they caught us here, it would all be over. We tied him up fast. Deshaun grabbed some extension cords. James found duct tape. We bound Bryant's wrists and ankles tight, slapped tape over his mouth. He tried to mumble something, but I didn't want to hear another word. He stayed there on the counseling room floor, the same room where he'd destroyed so many lives. James lifted the boy gently in his arms like he weighed nothing. The kid wrapped his arms around James's neck and buried his face in his shoulder, clinging to him like it was the only safe place left in the world. We moved quickly. Deshaun tucked the hard drive under his arm, kept his phone rolling, while I checked the hall one last time. Clear. We slipped through the service door, out into the cold night air, and into the parking lot. The silence out there was almost unbearable, just the echo of our footsteps on the concrete. We got to the car, slid the boy into the back seat, James sitting beside him while Deshaun climbed up front with me. I started the engine and forced myself to drive calm, steady, even though my pulse was slamming in my ears. We headed to Deshaun's girlfriend's house, Josephine. 20 minutes away. She was a registered foster parent, someone who had taken in kids before, kids who had nowhere else to go. The boy didn't say a word during the ride, just sat there in James's jacket, staring at nothing. Broken. When we pulled up, Josephine was already standing at the door. She rushed out the second we parked, took one look at the boy, and her whole face shifted into caretaker mode. She wrapped him in her arms, brought him inside, sat him gently on the couch. She got him water, a blanket, spoke to him in that calm, steady voice only true caregivers know how to use. That's when it happened. For the first time, the boy spoke. His voice was so faint we almost missed it. "My name is Ryder," he whispered. "Ryder Melton, 14. Been here 3 months." And then his story poured out. Shoplifting food. That's why he was locked up. He was hungry. He'd been dragged into that counseling room 4 times already. The first time just 2 weeks after arriving. They told him it was a simple evaluation. But when Bryant locked that door, Ryder knew something was wrong. Each time after that got worse. They threatened him, told him if he said a word, the punishment would be worse than anything he could imagine. And he wasn't the only one. Other boys in his unit knew. Some of them had been through it too. Josephine didn't flinch. She grabbed her camera, explained gently what she was doing, and began documenting his injuries. Bruises on his arms, marks on his wrists where restraints had cut into his skin. She took photos of everything, her hands steady, creating a record they couldn't deny. This time there would be proof. Josephine sat down across from us, her voice low but steady. She told us she'd seen boys come through her doors for years with the same injuries, the same hollow looks. She'd treated the bruises, the broken spirits, the silence, but she'd never known why. Some of those kids couldn't talk anymore, their speech just gone. Others were too terrified to open their mouths. And now, for the first time, she finally understood. The system hadn't just failed them. It had fed them to the monsters running that place. Ryder started crying again, soft, broken sobs. Josephine wrapped her arms around him, rocked him gently while he shook. Deshaun was already working like a man possessed. 3 laptops open, cords everywhere. He had the hard drive plugged in, making copies on a pile of USB sticks he'd pulled out of his backpack. James kept his eyes on the window, scanning the street like a hawk in case anyone had followed us. I sat there, numb, my mind spinning back to Caleb, my boy, lying in a hospital bed, machines beeping around him, lips parted but no words coming out. And now I knew. Now I had the truth. Proof carved in files and video. But it didn't heal the rage boiling inside me. I pulled out my phone and found the number Timothy's and had pressed into my hand that night in the parking lot. My thumb hovered over the screen before I hit call. She answered on the 3rd ring. I could barely get the words out. We've got it all. The videos, Bryant's confession, everything. The sound of her breaking down on the other end nearly floored me. She kept whispering, "Thank you, thank you. I've been waiting 2 years for someone to believe me about Timothy." While I held the phone to my ear, Deshaun didn't stop moving. He was making copy after copy, 3 laptops working at once, files flooding into USB drives. James had gone out to buy more. Deshaun even started uploading encrypted backups to the cloud using burner emails he'd just created. He wasn't taking chances. If something happened to us, the evidence would survive. Josephine came over quietly. She said she'd already reached out to a trauma counselor she trusted, someone who specialized in children who had been through the unthinkable. Ryder would be seen first thing in the morning. Until then, Josephine promised he'd be safe under her roof. The kid had curled up on the couch, still wrapped in James's jacket like it was a shield. Every few minutes he'd jolt awake, eyes wide, scanning the room like he expected someone to drag him back. And then, he'd remember where he was. When the copying was done, Deshaun handed me 5 USB drives. I shoved them into separate pockets, making sure no 2 were together. James got 3 more to stash at his place. We spread the evidence like seeds, too many to kill at once. We agreed to meet in the morning, but that night, there was no sleep for me. I lay staring at the ceiling, every second seeing my son hooked up to machines, nurses moving in and out while he fought to stay alive. And all the while, the men who'd destroyed him still walked free. I couldn't stop replaying the image of Bryant on that floor, the way his pants had been undone, the boy bent over that table, and the thought that it could have been Caleb in that same spot. Tuesday after Tuesday, while I sat at home, believing my son was safe in detention, I got up and paced the apartment, looking down at the empty street outside my window. The evidence was real, but the system? Corrupt, rotten to the core. Judges, senators, cops, they weren't going to stop this. They were buying it. If we waited for justice the normal way, more kids would get hurt. Witnesses silenced. Files destroyed. I knew we had to move faster than the machine built to protect predators. The next morning, my phone lit up with notifications. News alerts. Every local outlet running the same headline. Officer Bryant found bound at detention center. Warden claims gang-related break-in. I watched the footage with my hands clenched. Bryant's employee photo flashed across the screen, and the anchor's voice said he was recovering at home after a traumatic attack. Gang retaliation. That was their story, and the world was buying it. My phone buzzed again. An unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. A woman's voice came through, shaky but determined. She said she was Bryant's wife, and her husband wanted to make a deal. He'd testify against everyone involved if we agreed not to press charges for what he'd done to the boys. I repeated it out loud, and Deshaun, sitting next to me, immediately shook his head. Trap, he mouthed, eyes narrowed. And he was right, it sounded exactly like the kind of setup they'd try to pull. But we needed testimony. We needed Bryant's word to tie everything together. Without that, the system would bury us. So I agreed to meet. I chose a public diner downtown, figuring the crowd would give me at least some protection. An hour later, I walked in and spotted her instantly. A woman hunched in the corner booth, her coffee cup trembling in her hands. Her eyes were swollen, rimmed red like she hadn't slept in days. She looked up as I slid into the booth, and the words came spilling out. She said she had no idea what her husband had been doing until last night, when he came home bloody and broke down, confessing everything. Then she pulled out her phone and slid it across the table. My stomach dropped as I read message after message between Bryant and the other guards. Texts detailing their Tuesday night sessions, who they'd take, what they'd do, jokes about silencing kids, and dates stretching back months. It was like looking straight into hell. Her hands shook as she whispered that Bryant had admitted it all to her. The warden selling the videos, the deliberate brain injuries, the judge and senator paying tens of thousands per recording. I leaned in close and told her flatly, if Bryant wants any shot at a lighter sentence, he needs to turn himself in and fully cooperate. That's the only way. She nodded, said she'd already told him the same. But then her grip tightened on my arm. Her voice dropped to a warning. The warden has people everywhere. You're in danger now. All of you are. Her fear was real. I could see it in her eyes. When I left the diner, I checked my mirrors every few seconds. Every car behind me felt like it could be following. By the time I pulled into my apartment complex, my gut twisted, because 2 squad cars were already there, lights flashing against the walls. 4 officers stepped out, one holding a folded stack of papers. "We have a warrant for your arrest. Assault and battery on Officer Bryant. Retaliation." They weren't even trying to hide it. Could have run. God knows I wanted to, but running would have made me look guilty of more than I'd already been accused of. So I froze. Then Deshaun suddenly appeared, jumping out of his car across the street, phone in hand. "This is live," he shouted. "Facebook and YouTube. Everyone's watching." The officers faltered for just a second at the word live, but the lead officer pushed through, grabbing my arm and twisting it behind me so hard my shoulder nearly popped. Cold cuffs snapped shut around my wrists way too tight, cutting into my skin. He started rattling off my rights, but I barely heard him over the sound of neighbors gathering, whispering, pulling out their own phones. Deshaun kept his camera steady, his voice loud and clear. "They're arresting him for exposing child abuse at the detention center." The crowd gasped, some shouting back at the cops. It didn't matter. They shoved me toward the cruiser, slamming my head against the doorframe on the way in. Pain flared across my skull. Through the rear window, I could see Deshaun following us in his car. His phone still pointed at my arrest. He wasn't letting them bury this quietly. At the station, they stripped me of everything. Phone, wallet, even my belt. Fingerprints, mugshot, cold metal chair, and then a holding cell that reeked of piss and vomit, the stench making my stomach turn. 2 hours ticked by. Then the door opened. Deputy Chief Henderson himself stepped in, chest full of medals and ribbons, his face carved from stone. He pulled out a chair, sat across from me, and folded his hands. "You're in serious trouble," he said slowly, deliberately. "For attacking my brother's colleague." I stared him dead in the eye. "I want a lawyer," and I didn't say another word. Henderson leaned forward, his voice low and cold. "Lawyers won't save you," he sneered. "You broke into a government facility. You assaulted staff. That's 20 years easy. 20 years behind bars while your son grows up without a father." I kept my eyes locked on the wall behind him, refusing to give him the satisfaction of a reaction. Silence was my only weapon. He slammed his palm down on the table, the sound echoing like a gunshot. "You're digging yourself deeper by not cooperating." And that's when the door opened. A young woman walked in, carrying a leather briefcase. She introduced herself firmly. "Haley Robbins. I'm his court-appointed attorney." Her tone was like steel. "This interview is over. I need to speak with my client privately." Henderson's jaw tightened, his face burning red. He glared at me one last time and growled, "This isn't over." Then he stormed out, the door banging shut behind him. Haley waited until the echo died, then leaned in close. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I've been waiting years for this. Years for someone to finally expose what's happening in that place." My chest tightened. Could I actually trust her? She opened her legal pad and explained she'd been quietly collecting complaints from families, building a file, but she'd never had proof. Not until now. Within an hour, she had me released on bail using a technicality about the arrest being improperly handled. Just like that, I was free. Outside the station, she asked to see what evidence we had. I didn't take her to my apartment. Too risky. Instead, we drove to Deshaun's place, where one of the USB drives was hidden. I plugged it into his laptop, but I didn't let it out of my sight. Not until I knew I could trust her. Haley leaned forward, eyes fixed on the screen. 30 seconds into one of the videos, she slapped her hand over her mouth and bolted for the bathroom. I could hear her retching. When she came back, her face was pale as paper. "This is enough," she whispered. "Enough to bring down every single one of them." Right there, she started making calls. Within the hour, she'd arranged a meeting with an FBI agent named Donald Wyatt, a man already investigating Senator Davies for campaign finance crimes. Haley said this could be the missing link he needed. The next morning, we sat in a secure room at a federal building downtown while Agent Wyatt reviewed everything. His hands trembled as he scrolled through the files, as he listened to Bryant's recorded confession. Then he snapped the folder shut. "This is federal now. Local law enforcement has no jurisdiction. They can't touch you." He assigned agents to protect me, Deshaun, James, and Ryder. That night, the FBI raided the detention center with a federal warrant. The news footage was surreal. Agents hauling box after box out of the facility, parents of detained kids sobbing behind police tape. And then the headline I'll never forget. "Warden Sparks arrested at home, 3 a.m. They found more videos in his personal safe. More financial records tying everything together. And the next day, Bryant turned himself in. His wife had convinced him it was his only chance at seeing the outside of a prison again. Agent Wyatt wired him up, sent him back to meet with the guards. Bryant's hands were shaking so badly during the meeting that Officer Henderson narrowed his eyes. "What's wrong with you? You sick?" Bryant stammered. "Just worried about the raid. Think we should be concerned." That was all it took. Henderson and Cole started talking fast. About destroying evidence. About moving money. About warning the Harden brothers. And then, they said the words on tape. Admitting they'd been doing this for years. Admitting the warden paid them extra to keep quiet. every syllable captured. And this time, there was no covering it up. Within hours, it all came crashing down. The FBI moved fast. Cole, Henderson, the Harden brothers, all yanked from their homes in the middle of the night. The Harden brothers thought they could bolt, but agents tackled them flat in their own backyard. At the station, the whole crew collapsed under pressure. They turned on each other instantly, clawing for deals like rats scrambling off a sinking ship. Cole swore it was Henderson's idea to target the boys' speech centers, damage them just enough so they could never testify. Henderson blamed the warden, saying Sparks was the one pocketing most of the video money. And the Harden brothers? They claimed they were forced to participate, that it was either obey or lose their jobs. Agent Wyatt didn't sugarcoat it. They're all facing federal charges. Mandatory minimum of 25 years. No way out. The next morning, Wyatt called me into his office. His desk was covered in bank records, neat stacks of paper that made my stomach twist. He showed me transfers traced straight to the judge. 6 years' worth, funneled into Cayman Islands accounts. Over $2 million. And Senator Davies? Worse, almost $4 million through shell companies his accountant had set up. Wyatt slid me a spreadsheet, every date matched to a victim, every transaction tied to an assault. And then I saw it. Caleb's name, $50,000 beside it. I sat down hard, like the air had been knocked out of me. My son. They had put a price tag on my son. 3 days later, Ryder had to testify before the grand jury. Josephine held his hand the whole way to the federal courthouse, never letting go. I waited outside, pacing, while he spent 2 hours reliving the nightmare. When he came out, he was pale and shaking, but the prosecutor said he'd been incredible, gave them everything they needed. That afternoon, the news broke, the arrests, the charges, and then my phone exploded with calls. Parents I'd never met, fathers, mothers, sobbing into the receiver. Their sons wanted to talk now. Over the next week, 17 boys came forward. 17. Every single one with the same deliberate injury pattern in their speech centers. The FBI searched Sparks' house again, this time with better tech. And that's when they uncovered it. A hidden room behind a bookshelf in his basement. Full studio, $500,000 in equipment, editing computers, soundproof walls, and backup drives, every video cataloged by date and victim. 8 years worth. Meanwhile, I visited Caleb every morning, sat by his bed, held his hand, and told him we got them. We got the bad men. He couldn't answer, but his eyes followed me, locked on my face. And the day I told him Bryant was going away forever, his fingers tightened around mine harder than they had since the injury. The nurse said it was a good sign. His brain was fighting to heal. Haley came to the hospital with stacks of legal documents for the civil suit. She explained that damages could reach $100 million, enough for lifetime care for every victim, and then some. And just when I thought it couldn't get any bigger, the judge tried to flee. His lawyer must have warned him the indictments were coming. Airport security grabbed him at the international terminal. Fake passport in one hand, 30 grand in cash in the other. The footage was everywhere. Him crying, begging, claiming innocence, while agents dragged him away in cuffs. Finally, the whole city could see the truth. The next morning, Senator Davies stepped up to a podium with the flags behind him and cameras everywhere. He denied everything. Voice steady, jaw clenched. But by then reporters had already dug up the shell company paperwork tying him to the payments. Within hours, his own party leaders were on TV demanding he resign and fully cooperate. 3 of his biggest donors bailed the same day. Money dries up fast when the truth starts leaking. That night, my phone lit up, Deshaun. He whispered that a black SUV had tailed him from his warehouse shift all the way home. 2 men sat in it across the street for an hour, engine idling, lights off. Only when he called 911 did they pull away like ghosts. The FBI didn't hesitate after that. By morning, they had protection on our whole family. Agents shadowing us to work, to the store, even to the hospital. You get used to the suits, kind of. Okay, not really. Then James called me at dawn, voice cracking. He'd been fired from the auto shop out of nowhere. His boss wouldn't look him in the eye, just muttered that someone important threatened to shut the business down if James kept working there. Haley filed a wrongful termination suit before lunch, and FBI added witness intimidation to their case. Every scare tactic they threw at us just made us dig our heels in deeper. 2 weeks crawled by, and then, finally, a sliver of light. At the hospital, during Caleb's therapy, a nurse tugged me aside and showed me his progress chart. The line was trending up for the first time. She pointed to the monitor tracking his throat movement. I watched my boy really try to push sound through damaged pathways. The noises came out rough, broken. But they were there. I sat with him for 3 hours, squeezing his hand every time a new sound made it into the air. Not words yet, but hope, loud and clear. That afternoon, Bryant's wife walked into Haley's office carrying a cardboard box like it weighed 100 pounds. She spread the contents across the conference table. Receipts, bank slips, notes she'd squirreled away without knowing why, cash withdrawals that lined up perfectly with camera equipment purchases. She said she'd overheard Bryant talking about angles and lighting for the counseling room. The divorce papers were already filed. She wanted immunity in exchange for the truth. Haley recorded for 4 hours, every whisper, every late-night call, every pattern from 8 years of a marriage rotting from the inside. She also revealed Bryant's side hustle, selling copies of the videos to private collectors he met online. My stomach turned, but the paper trail was undeniable. 3 days later, at 2 in the morning, my phone rang again. Agent Wyatt. His voice was tight with adrenaline. The FBI had just hit multiple sites, facilities in Georgia and Alabama, after emails from the warden led them down the chain. Turned out the same private company that ran our detention center operated 6 more across the southeast. Investigators found the same Tuesday night pattern at 3 of them, boys with the same targeted brain injuries. The network was bigger than anyone wanted to admit. 40-plus staff trading videos, swapping techniques for silencing victims like it was some twisted training manual. And as Wyatt kept talking, I stared at the ceiling, awake and shaking. Because if the network stretched across state lines like that, then somewhere, someone higher up was still pulling strings, and we hadn't cut the head off the snake yet. Within a week of the raids, the dam started to break. Officer Henderson's lawyer reached out first, practically begging the FBI for a deal before the others flipped on him. Henderson showed up with Cole, and the feds separated them into different rooms. For 12 straight hours, both men spilled everything. They described how the warden had recruited them, how he trained them with surgical precision, exactly where to strike boys so the damage would land on the speech center without killing them. They gave up names of buyers. They laid out bank records. They explained how they picked victims. Kids with no strong family, no lawyer, no money. Kids like Caleb. By the end, both Henderson and Cole had signed plea deals. 15 years in exchange for testifying against the rest, including the judge who'd been their biggest customer for 5 years. The next morning, I was at the hospital watching Caleb with a new piece of equipment they'd brought in. A screen covered in letters. The machine tracked his eye movements, teaching him to focus long enough on each letter to build words. At first, it was a mess, just random letters strung together. But after 3 days, he spelled DAD. The computer's robotic voice read it out loud. That, and then, LOVYOU. One painstaking letter at a time, taking almost 10 minutes. But when that metallic voice finally said, "Love you," I broke. I was sobbing in the middle of that therapy room, not caring who saw. My boy had found a way to talk to me again. That same week, the governor called a press conference. He announced a top-to-bottom investigation of every juvenile facility in the state, with new federal oversight requirements. And then came the news that made Josephine cry when she called me that night. She'd been appointed to design a victim advocacy program. Mandatory cameras in every room. Independent monitors reviewing footage weekly. For the first time, real protections were being put in place. Ryder, meanwhile, was settling into his foster home. A family trained to care for kids with deep trauma. He was in daily therapy now, slowly starting to open up about what happened. Josephine visited him twice a week and told me he still had nightmares. Still froze in fear when left alone with adult men. But the family understood his triggers. They gave him space to heal, and they kept telling him over and over, "You're safe. You'll never go back there again." Meanwhile, our civil lawsuit exploded into the spotlight. 3 major news networks ran specials on the case. Protesters flooded the state capitol demanding justice. Suddenly, the court fast-tracked our case. At the settlement conference, the state tried to throw out a number, 50 million. 50 million, split between all 17 victims. Haley laughed right in their faces. She stood up, told them 17 destroyed lives weren't worth pocket change, and walked out. Later, she told us flat out, "We'll see them in court, and when we win, it'll be 10 times that pathetic offer." And the country was watching now. Donations poured in from strangers coast to coast, helping cover the boys' medical bills while we waited for the real justice that was finally within reach. A month later, I found myself in Washington, D.C., sitting in a wood-paneled hearing room with cameras flashing and senators staring me down. I told them everything about Caleb, about the other boys, about how local police had circled the wagons to protect predators instead of victims. They showed charts of the injury patterns, rolled footage of the so-called facilities, and asked me to explain how children could be brutalized in government custody while every complaint was buried. For 6 hours, I relived it all. And when it was over, 3 senators promised they would draft legislation mandating federal oversight of every juvenile facility in the country, with suspicious injuries reported directly to the FBI, not local cops who might be on the payroll. The committee chairman closed with an apology. An apology to every family. "We failed to protect your children," he said. My hands shook under the table. Words couldn't undo what had already been done, but maybe, finally, they were going to change something. 2 months after his arrest, Bryant stood before a federal judge for sentencing. Even with his so-called cooperation, the judge's words cut like steel. "Your crimes against children are unforgivable. 25 years. And they didn't even dare put him in general population. Word of what he'd done had spread, and inmates were already promising to make him pay the moment he stepped through those gates." 3 weeks later, it was Sparks' turn. The warden. I sat in that courtroom every single day, refusing to look away while prosecutors played the very videos he'd sold for profit. Jurors couldn't even hold their gaze. One woman broke down and ran out sobbing when the screen showed the worst of it. His lawyer tried spinning a story that Bryant had forced him into it. But the evidence shredded that lie. Offshore accounts stacked with millions, payments dating back 8 years before Bryant ever wore a uniform. Then came the witnesses, 23 boys, testifying through written statements because most of them still couldn't speak. Every story carried the same chilling pattern. Tuesday nights, the counseling room, silence forced on them. When prosecutors unveiled the medical scans, brain tissue clearly targeted, the courtroom itself seemed to crack. Even the presiding judge had to recess, leaving the bench with tears in his eyes. The verdict came back fast. Guilty on all 117 counts, from conspiracy to child abuse material to operating a criminal enterprise. The sentencing was thunderous. Life without parole, plus 300 years, served consecutively. As bailiffs dragged him from the courtroom, Sparks screamed about appeals, while families in the gallery stood clapping through tears. And then came the judge's trial. The one who'd been buying children's pain for more than a decade. Victims poured out of the woodwork, not just from the detention center, but from his own neighborhood. 3 boys from down the block, 2 from the youth basketball team he'd coached. Financial records painted the picture. Steady payments to Sparks stretching back 12 years. And then the FBI's discovery. A false wall in his basement hiding hard drives. Thousands of videos cataloged and stashed away like trophies. In a final, desperate move, he tried to cut a deal, offering to name other buyers. But prosecutors shut him down. "We already have everyone," they said. The jury deliberated barely 2 hours before handing down the verdict. Guilty. 40 years federal time with no parole for 30. Forced sex offender registration. And the civil suits? They stripped him bare. His house, his assets, every dollar he had left. Seized by the families of the boys he'd destroyed. For once, the monsters were the ones losing everything. 2 weeks later, it was Senator Davies' turn to face justice. For years, he'd walked the halls of power like he was untouchable. But this time, not even his connections could shield him. The FBI laid it all bare. Records proving he funneled campaign funds through shell companies to buy videos. $3 million worth over 5 years. Worse, prosecutors revealed he had personally requested certain boys, chosen from intake photos at the detention centers. On the first day of trial, his wife sat in the gallery, face pale, eyes hollow. By the second day, she was gone. That week, she filed for divorce. When reporters asked, she broke down, saying she had no idea what her husband had been doing and wished she could have stopped it. She apologized to every family, saying she was sorry her silence had cost so much. The jury didn't hesitate. 30 years. No pension. The $2 million retirement package he thought he'd enjoy in luxury, redirected into a victim compensation fund. When it was all over, the dominoes started to fall in the best possible way. Haley, the lawyer who'd stood by us from the beginning, became a household name. News anchors called her the hero attorney who took down an entire network of predators. Families from across the country began reaching out, begging for her help. So she built something bigger, a nonprofit law firm dedicated to protecting children in state custody. The state gave her a grant, and within a month, she had 5 more lawyers at her side, ready to fight. Agent Wyatt got his recognition too. In Washington, at a ceremony under the bright lights, the FBI director himself pinned a medal to his chest. Wyatt told reporters afterward that none of this would have been possible without regular people standing up against corruption. He looked right into the cameras and thanked our family for being brave enough to fight back. And then, for months after the night everything came crashing down, Caleb came home. The hospital cleared him, with round-the-clock nursing care covered by the settlement money. His room was transformed into a small medical unit, machines to strengthen his throat muscles, a computer system that gave him a voice, and a quiet strength that only he seemed to carry. He'd started learning sign language, hands shaky at first but growing steadier each day. The speech therapist came 3 times a week, reminding us that every rough sound he forced out was a victory, a sign that his brain was still trying to heal. I sat with him often, watching him spell words with his eyes, or signing slowly with his hands, and I held on to every little milestone like it was gold. Meanwhile, Deshaun turned his pain into purpose. He began visiting youth groups, standing in front of kids who'd never imagined what really goes on behind closed doors. He told them the truth, how predators hide in the very systems meant to protect them, and how to recognize the warning signs. Josephine helped him build a full program, workshops, resources, hotline numbers. Together, they spoke at schools, churches, community centers, reaching hundreds of kids every single month. From the ashes of everything we'd lost, something new was being built. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like the world was finally listening. James struggled for months after getting fired. Every job application ended in silence. Every interview cut short once they realized who he was tied to. But then Haley stepped in. She offered him a place at her new law firm, not as a lawyer but as an investigator. She said his street smarts, his instincts were exactly what families needed when they were fighting for their kids. And James didn't just take the job, he thrived. His wrongful termination case wrapped up with a $200,000 settlement when his old boss couldn't explain why he was fired right after testifying. With that money, James bought his first home and enrolled in night classes to get his private investigator license. From being thrown out of the system, he'd carved himself a new future. Meanwhile, Timothy's aunt kept her promise to the boys who didn't make it out. She reached out to every family, every parent, every sibling touched by the scandal. And together, they started a support group that met every Thursday night at the community center. They shared stories, tears, silence, hope. Timothy's aunt said finally knowing who killed her nephew gave her a kind of peace, enough to sleep through the night for the first time in years. The pain would never vanish. But now it had a name. 6 months after that night in the counseling room, I was sitting with Caleb, running through his speech exercises like we did every day. And then something different happened. His mouth shaped itself differently. The sound came out broken, slurred, but clear enough to shatter me. Asterisk, Dad. Asterisk. For the first time since his injury, my son called me Dad. The therapist started crying right there in the room, telling me this was the breakthrough, the first barrier smashed. More words would follow. I grabbed Caleb's hand, tears streaming, whispering, "I hear you, son. I hear you." 2 weeks later, Ryder showed up at our door. He wasn't the shattered boy we'd carried out of that room. Not anymore. He stood there in a crisp school uniform, eyes bright, holding himself tall. He hugged me tight and told me he was pulling straight A's. Said he wanted to be a lawyer like Haley one day, to fight for kids who couldn't fight for themselves. Then he turned to Caleb. He told him he was brave, brave for surviving, brave for fighting, even without words. Caleb smiled back, his hand twitching in a half-formed sign he'd been practicing. His way of saying thank you. 3 months after the arrests, the state announced the detention center would never open its doors again. Instead, they converted it into a community hub for at-risk youth. At the dedication ceremony, they unveiled a bronze plaque with 5 names engraved, Timothy's, and for other boys who hadn't survived their injuries. Timothy's aunt stood before the crowd, her voice trembling but strong. She said the community had failed those children once, but would never forget them again. And then, our story went national. Headlines across the country, families flooding Congress with calls, demanding change. 6 months later, we got it. Caleb's Law. Congress passed it unanimously. The president signed it in the Rose Garden with me and Caleb sitting in the front row, cameras flashing, reporters capturing the moment. Caleb's name now carried a law behind it. A promise that no facility could ever run without cameras in every room, without independent inspectors combing through footage every month. The system that had tried to silence my son now had to answer to him. 8 months after it all began, the settlement money finally came through. Enough to guarantee Caleb the best care and therapy for the rest of his life. We packed up our cramped old apartment and moved 40 miles away, into a quiet neighborhood where nobody knew our story. A place where Caleb could heal without strangers staring at him everywhere we went. The new house had a therapy room filled with his equipment, and a yard where he could practice walking without his cane when his legs grew stronger. And while Caleb worked on healing, the ripple effects of our case spread nationwide. Other states launched investigations into their own juvenile facilities. The FBI coordinated raids across 12 states, leading to 43 more arrests and hundreds of victims identified, every one of them carrying the same brain injury patterns. Some centers were shut down. Others had their entire staff replaced. Caleb's right side stayed weak from the damage, but months of occupational therapy taught him to use his left hand. One afternoon, he picked up a pencil, his movements shaky but determined, and slowly wrote out, "Thank you for fighting for me." 6 little words, written in uneven lines, that I still carry folded in my wallet to this day. A year after the night in the counseling room, the prosecutor called. They needed Caleb's testimony for the last trial of a guard. And so Caleb sat in a courtroom, his eye-tracking computer set up in front of him. He typed out his story, letter by letter, as the jury watched on the big screen. No embellishment, no theatrics, just the raw truth appearing word by word. When he finished, the guard's lawyer didn't even attempt cross-examination. The jury returned in under an hour. Guilty. 30 years. The judge said Caleb's testimony was the bravest thing he'd seen in 4 decades on the bench. Life kept moving forward. On the anniversary of the night we saved Ryder, Deshawn dropped to one knee and proposed to Josephine. 6 months later, we packed into her church to watch them marry. Caleb stood proudly as best man, using his device to deliver a speech that had the whole church in tears. Deshawn saved not just me, the computer voice said, but every boy who would have been hurt if we hadn't stopped it. He is a hero, and he deserves every happiness in the world. Josephine wore her grandmother's dress. Deshawn couldn't stop smiling. Even James cracked jokes during his toast about his cousin finally settling down, and for once, laughter came without the shadow of pain. Caleb took his studies online since regular school was too difficult with his disabilities. But he shocked everyone, straight A's, perfect scores, essays on disability rights that teachers shared across districts. He told me through his device that he wanted to become an advocate, to fight for disabled victims who couldn't speak for themselves. He never missed an assignment, no matter how hard therapy wore him out. Meanwhile, Timothy's aunt's support group kept growing. From a handful of grieving parents to over 50 families, all meeting in the old detention center, now a community hub. We sat in circles, swapping stories, cheering on small victories. A child speaking their first word, a nightmare-free night, a family getting through another day. Some drove hours just to sit with people who understood. We brought food. The kids who could play ran in the halls where abuse once reigned. And the walls carried something new, hope. 3 years later, I walked into Caleb's room and saw him with his therapist. His voice came out rough, deeper than it had been before the injury, but clear. "Dad, can you help me practice my graduation speech?" he asked, holding up a sheet of paper. He read line by line, his tongue working hard to shape words that once seemed lost forever. At one point, he stopped, looked right at me and said, I remember everything that happened to me, and I'm proud of you for not giving up when everyone told you to stop fighting. My eyes burned hot, and I had to look away. The therapist smiled, packed up, and promised she'd see us for the last session before graduation. 2 weeks later, I sat in the front row of the community center's main hall. The same building that once destroyed children now held their triumphs. Caleb crossed the stage in his cap and gown, steady on his cane. The principal announced his name with honors, praising his perfect grades. And as he accepted that diploma, I thought back to the night 3 years earlier, breaking into that counseling room and finding Bryant with that boy. We hadn't just survived, we'd burned their whole empire to the ground. We made sure no other child would ever suffer like Caleb did. And now, standing there in his cap and gown, Caleb wasn't just a survivor. He was proof that even when the system tries to silence you, the truth will find a way to speak. There's a drawing my daughter made that I can't throw away. It looks innocent, almost childish, until you realize what the magic drink in her hands was supposed to be. My husband's mother once tried to call my own child to prove I was a bad parent. I kicked her out of my house on the spot. 12 months later, she went even lower. She tried to get my daughter pulled from school without telling me. That's the kind of story this is. I adored my husband. I did not adore the woman who raised him. The first time I met her, really met her, wasn't at a brunch or a calm family dinner. It was 5 minutes after our wedding reception started. She glided toward me in an off-white sequin-heavy gown that could have doubled as a disco ball. I thought maybe there'd been a wardrobe mix-up with a pageant queen. She stopped inches from my face, smiled with all teeth and said, "You'll never know him like I do. No hello, no congratulations, just that." I froze with my bouquet clutched to my chest. At first, I laughed because I honestly thought it was a joke. But then her eyes went sharp, like I just asked her for a loan and a kidney. And I realized she meant every word. "Well," I chirped, keeping my voice bright, "I'm sure I'll get to know Zach in my own way." She didn't respond. She pivoted, gathered her skirt like royalty, and went to line up for dinner. Zach saw my face from across the room and came straight over. "Want me to have her escorted out?" he asked under his breath. I shook my head. "No, we'll figure it out." I wanted so badly to believe that. My parents had me later in life. They were gone by the time I married. I was stubborn, determined, really, that any child we had would know a grandmother's love. I didn't realize I was inviting a storm into the nursery. Nyla was born a year later. Dark curls, serious eyes, a little squeak for a cry. I stepped away from work so I could be home with her while Zach carried us financially. We were tired, happy, that dizzy brand of in love you only get when the hospital bracelet is still on your wrist. I would have stepped in front of a bus for that child. Zach too. Keeping her safe became the axis our life spun around. For years rushed by. Suddenly we were at our dining table, elbows deep in pink crayon dust, writing out invitations for Nyla's 4th birthday party. She was so proud of the loopy letters she'd learned to make. Half the envelopes had hearts where stamps go. I asked if there was anyone else she wanted to invite, expecting maybe a teacher or the neighbor's golden retriever. "Big mommy, big mommy, big mommy." She bounced in her chair, crayon clenched like a microphone. My fingers went to the bridge of my nose on instinct. Big mommy, to Nyla, meant her grandmother, my mother-in-law. Up to that point, their relationship lived mostly on FaceTime, which was safer. Every few calls, Nyla would ask for peanut butter. She's deathly allergic. I always shut it down. But my mother-in-law would swoop in, voice sweet as frosting. "You're making her fragile. Let the girl have what she wants." And just like that, I was the mean one. The fun police. The mom who didn't let her be a kid. I hate that feeling, the one where you know you're right, but a child looks at you like you've hidden Christmas. I should have stood firm. I should have said no. Instead, I caved to the idea of the magical grandma moment and put her on the guest list. Party day arrived in a tornado of streamers, cupcakes, and those cone hats nobody can keep on for more than 11 seconds. My mother-in-law showed up carrying a homemade cake, a tote stuffed with snacks, and a tray of frosted cupcakes like she was auditioning for a bake-off. For a split second, I softened. Maybe this was the bridge-mending gesture I'd been praying for. Then I saw it. Wedged in that tote, half hidden. A family-sized pack of Reese's. My stomach dropped like an elevator. I stepped into her path and gently steered her back out to the front garden. "What's in the cake?" I asked, and my voice came out lower than I expected. She blinked. "Oh, vanilla." I took the cake, lifted the lid, and inhaled. I didn't need a lab test. The scent hit me like a memory I didn't ask for. "Peanut butter. You can put every single thing with peanuts back in your car," I said, slow and even. "Or you can turn around and drive home." She tried to brush past me with a scoff, like I'd never enforce a boundary in my life. I planted my feet and didn't budge. For once, I was the wall she couldn't swan through. She glared, spun on those heels, and clattered back to her car. When she returned, her hands were empty and her smile had been replaced with a tight, offended line. I didn't tell Zach right then. I wanted the day to be Nyla's, not another episode of the mother-in-law show. So I kept my eyes on the snack table like a hawk and made sure Nyla stayed glued to safe foods while the party rolled on. And it actually went beautifully for a while. There were squeals and musical chairs, a carpet of pink wrapping paper confetti, tiny hands clapping offbeat to kids' bop songs. Nyla wore her birthday crown like it had been forged for her head. And then, near the end, my little girl started to cry. At first, I thought it was the post-present crash, the attention battery running low. Her friends circled and hugged her, asking if she was okay. 30 seconds later, the sound changed. Her cough wasn't the whiny, "I'm tired" kind. It was hard scraping. Her cheeks flushed red. Her hands flew to her throat and scratched like it itched from the inside. "Sarah, what did you do?" My mother-in-law shrieked, voice like a smoke alarm. I didn't even look at her. My fingers fumbled for my phone. I was already crying as I tapped 911. The world tunneled. The music, the helium balloons, the mess. Everything faded except Nyla and the sound of her breaths getting smaller. The paramedics were fast. They were calm in that practiced way that tells you this isn't new for them. They treated her, watched her color creep back from crimson to pink, and told me what we already knew in our bones. Peanuts had gotten to her. My heart came down out of my throat, but it kept hammering. The rest of the parents watched me like I was a headline in the making, while the paramedics asked me routine questions. "Are you aware of the allergy? Do you keep the allergen in the home?" I could feel the judgment like heat lamps on my skin. Eventually, they were satisfied that I wasn't negligent. They left us with instructions and relief. But the damage was done in other ways. By that night, Zach and I were booted from the class WhatsApp group. My phone lit up with texts that read like politely worded slaps. "We're uncomfortable sending our child to your home. We hope you understand." I cried until Zach's shirt was damp. I couldn't shake the thought that I'd failed my daughter on her own birthday. Zach didn't hesitate. He blocked his mother everywhere. Calls, texts, social media, and told me we were done with her. Forever. I believed him. I wanted to. That promise was a soft place to land for a few hours. At 8 a.m. the next morning, someone pounded on our front door. The knock had authority to it, the kind that makes your stomach flip. I opened it to find a woman with sleeve tattoos and a face that didn't move when she frowned. Child Protective Services. My hands went cold. She didn't introduce herself so much as enter. She brushed past me and began opening cabinets like we were on a cooking show. "What is this?" she snapped, spotting a jar of peanut butter on the top shelf of the pantry. The one Nyla can't reach even on her tallest stool. "Are you kidding me? It's my husband's," I said, palms up, voice shaking. "It's stored out of reach. I'm obsessive about hand washing if it's ever opened. Nyla doesn't touch it." Her eyebrow climbed as her pen hovered above a clipboard. "And yet your daughter had an allergic reaction yesterday." "At her party," I answered. "Someone gave her something with peanuts." "Not me." "Someone? Or you?" she said, letting the question dangle like a trap. Heat rose to my face. I would never put my child's life in danger. Ever. She kept moving, medicine cabinet, bathroom drawers, even popped open the washing machine like she expected to find contraband Tide Pods. She clicked her tongue at an expired bottle of ibuprofen and sighed theatrically when she saw a single stuffed unicorn on the living room rug. "Is this how you normally keep your home?" she asked, pen poised as if my answer would decide the weather. "Yes," I said evenly. We let our daughter play with her toys. My nails dug crescents into my palms to keep from shaking. After 20 minutes that felt like 2 hours, she capped her pen, pulled a card from her blazer, and handed it over. The corner was bent, like it had been given and taken back too many times. "I'll file my report. We'll be in touch about next steps. In the meantime, you should consider whether this environment is appropriate for a child with special medical needs." Her tone made "consider" sound like "confess." She walked out without looking back, leaving the front door open to the morning air and a house that suddenly felt too quiet. I stood there with that card sweating in my hand, listening to the faint buzz of the fridge and Nyla's soft breathing from the couch where she was resting. I thought the worst of it had passed. I thought we could exhale. But I didn't know then that my mother-in-law wasn't even close to done, and that her next move would hit someplace I never imagined. Nyla's school. After the CPS workers stormed out of our house, I grabbed my phone with trembling hands and called Zach at the office. He didn't even hesitate. He was home within 20 minutes, tie yanked loose, his face pale like he'd seen a ghost. We sat on the couch, staring at each other in silence until the words finally broke out of me. She called them, Zach. "Your mom called CPS." He clenched his jaw, knuckles bone white around his phone. "She's trying to take Nyla from us," I whispered. My voice cracked on the last word. "Over my dead body," he said, low and sharp, before dialing our lawyer's number right there, his thumb shaking as he pressed the screen. That night, neither of us slept. Every few minutes one of us got up, creeping into Nyla's room to make sure her little chest was still rising and falling, that her breaths weren't ragged after the allergic reaction. I lay awake replaying every second of that birthday party. Every laugh, every second I looked away. How could I have missed it? The only person with peanut products that day was my mother-in-law. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a text from one of the moms who'd been at the party. "Just wanted to let you know, I saw your MIL give Nyla something from her purse when you were cutting the cake. Thought you should know." My hands shook so violently I dropped my phone onto the hardwood floor. She'd done it. She'd actually poisoned her own granddaughter on purpose. I showed Zach the text, his face drained of color. He whispered, almost like he was afraid to hear it out loud. "My mom, my own mother could have killed her. We spent the rest of the day documenting everything. Screenshots of texts, the CPS report, every ugly comment Linda had ever made about Nyla's allergy. I took photos of how we stored the peanut butter at the top shelf out of reach. I even recorded a video, my voice steady despite the tears in my eyes, explaining exactly how we handled every meal and snack. Our lawyer told us to gather as much proof as possible. But deep down, I knew this was only the beginning of whatever sick plan Linda was weaving. That night, I watched Nyla sleeping peacefully, her tiny fingers curled around her stuffed unicorn. I swore to myself, to her, to the universe. I will protect you at all costs, even if it meant burning every bridge and standing alone against the world. The next morning, Zach was already in the kitchen, flipping pancakes in a robot voice while Nyla giggled so hard she snorted. For a moment, it felt normal again. But then the memory of the CPS visit slammed back into me, sour in my stomach. We need a plan, I told Zach while Nyla was distracted by cartoons. Your mom isn't just meddling anymore. She's trying to take our daughter. He nodded, jaw tight. I already called the lawyer again this morning. He says we need to keep documenting everything and file a formal complaint against that CPS worker. The way she handled things was completely unprofessional. So I sat down and wrote out 3 pages of notes. Every word that woman said, the way she barged into my house, how she mocked our housekeeping, how she ignored the safety precautions we put in place. Zach filed the complaint, but the person on the phone sounded like they were half asleep. We'll look into it, they said. My gut told me nothing would come of it. That's when I told Zach, we need to be proactive. I don't trust that woman, and I sure as hell don't trust your mom. The next day, I ordered security cameras, 1 in the living room, 1 in the kitchen, 1 in Nyla's playroom. Not to spy, just to prove who we were as parents, to have undeniable evidence against whatever twisted lies Linda was spreading. I also started keeping a log. Every meal, every snack, every activity, documented down to the minute. Felt paranoid, but paranoia was safer than burying my child. 3 days later, I walked Nyla to preschool. Miss Amber, her teacher, usually greeted me with a hug-like smile. That morning, she barely looked me in the eye. Another mom I used to chat with suddenly remembered she had to take a phone call as soon as I opened my mouth. Nyla tugged my sleeve, eyes wide. Mommy, why is everyone being weird? I knelt down and smoothed her little backpack straps. Sometimes grown-ups just have a lot on their minds, sweetheart. But when I picked her up, Miss Amber handed me a folded piece of paper. We found this in Nyla's cubby. I didn't see who put it there. It was typed, no handwriting, no name. Just 5 words that made my blood run cold. Real moms protect their kids. My hands shook so hard the paper crumpled. When I showed Zach, his face twisted in rage. He called the school immediately, demanding to know how anyone could have slipped something into our daughter's cubby. The director apologized, promised tighter security, but the damage was done. Linda had found a way into Nyla's safe space. That weekend, we took Nyla to the park, desperate for some slice of normal. She was laughing on the swings when I noticed a silver Lexus parked across the street. My stomach dropped. Linda's car. I scooped Nyla into my arms. Zach, it's her. She's watching us. He stormed toward the car, fists clenched, but she pulled away before he reached her. When we got home, our landline was blinking. I pressed play. Just checking on my grandbaby. Linda's voice oozed through the machine. All fake, honey. Since you won't let me see her, I have to make sure she's safe from a distance. That playground looked dangerous. So many germs, so many rough kids. CPS might be interested in how negligent you're being. Zach's face turned crimson. He deleted the message mid-sentence. Unbelievable. I'm calling the lawyer again tomorrow. The week crawled by, quiet enough to make my skin crawl. Quiet meant she was plotting. And I was right. On Wednesday, the school called during nap time. Mrs. Thompson, we need you to come in. There's been an incident. My heart pounded all the way there. The director met me in her office, her hands folded tight. Someone called pretending to be you, she said carefully. They told us Nyla needed to be picked up early for a surprise trip. Luckily, our receptionist thought the voice didn't sound quite right, so she called your cell to confirm. The room spun. Someone had tried to take my daughter. We didn't catch the caller, and unfortunately the security camera outside the office malfunctioned today. I laughed once, bitter, humorless. Of course it did. This had Linda written all over it. The director leaned forward. We're concerned for the safety of all our students. This situation is escalating. We need to consider our options. I knew what she meant. Nyla was a liability. That night, Zach and I made the hardest decision yet. We pulled Nyla out of preschool. He arranged to work from home 3 days a week, and I'd homeschool her the rest. It broke my heart. She loved her friends, her little routines, but safety came first, because now it wasn't just sabotage. It was abduction, and Linda wasn't stopping until she got what she wanted. The following Monday, I drove Nyla clear across town to a playground where no one knew our names. No one knew our story. She was busy digging castles in the sandbox when a woman I'd never seen before walked straight up to me. Are you Sarah? She asked, hesitating like she wasn't sure she should even be talking to me. Yes, I answered carefully, my guard immediately up, her brow furrowed. That's strange. I got an email about a dangerous mother at this park. said you give your kid peanuts even though she's allergic. It even had your picture attached. I felt like my lungs had been punched empty. My voice cracked when I said, "That's a lie. Who sent you that?" She shrugged, uncomfortable. "Some local mom group. I don't know the person. Just thought I'd check." And then she walked away, leaving me standing there as other parents started whispering, side-eyeing me like I was poison. I scooped Nyla out of the sandbox, ignoring her protests about leaving, and hurried home with tears stinging my eyes. The second I got through the door, I pulled up Facebook and searched every local mom group I could find. My stomach twisted when I saw it. A post about me. A blurry photo, clearly taken through my kitchen window. You could just make out a jar on the top shelf, our jar of peanut butter. The caption screamed, "This mother is under CPS investigation for endangering her allergic child." That night, I sat across from Zach, my hands shaking. "She's turning everyone against us. She's isolating us so we'll have no one in our corner." He rubbed his face with both hands. I never thought my own mom would stoop this low. The next morning, a small miracle. An invitation to a birthday party from one of Nyla's old classmates. She squealed with excitement, and I felt hope for the first time in weeks. I RSVP'd yes before I even finished reading. But 2 days before the party, the mom called. "I'm sorry," she said awkwardly, "but we've heard some concerning things. I think it's best if Nyla doesn't attend." "What concerning things?" I demanded. She sighed. "I got a voicemail from someone who says they're close to your family. They mentioned CPS. They mentioned child endangerment. I just can't risk it." I hung up without another word. Nyla was heartbroken when I told her. She couldn't understand why her friends didn't want to play with her, and I couldn't explain without shattering her world. That night, I lay awake, replaying the CPS worker's behavior. How quickly she'd believed Linda's lies. I pulled up her professional profile and dug deeper. To my shock, she was connected to Linda on a networking site. Not close friends, but close enough. "Zach?" I whispered, shoving my phone at him. "Look, they know some of the same people. This is a conflict of interest." No wonder she was biased. We started digging deeper, creating a fake profile and watching their public interactions. One post in particular chilled me. The CPS worker bragging about helping on a case referred by someone in my network. Screenshots were taken, every scrap of proof saved. The very next morning, a loud thwack rattled our front door. Zach opened it to find egg yolk dripping down the glass, shells scattered across the porch. Mr. Peterson, our elderly neighbor, called out while watering his lawn. Silver car older lady, drove by around 2 in the morning. "Tossed something at your door." Zach's face darkened. "That's it. I'm confronting her." I begged him not to go, but he wouldn't hear it. 3 hours later, he dragged himself home, exhausted and furious. "She denied everything," he muttered, collapsing on the couch. "Cried about being alienated from her granddaughter. Said she's filing for grandparent visitation rights." My heart dropped. Can she even do that? Our lawyer says she can try, but unless one parent's dead or she had an established role in Nyla's life, it's unlikely. Still, unease gnawed at me. And sure enough, the following week a court notice arrived. Linda had filed. Her petition twisted everything, claiming the peanut incident was proof I was unfit, that CPS had flagged us, that pulling Nyla from school was isolation. "This is insane," I shouted, waving the papers. "She's the one who gave Nyla peanuts. She's the one who called CPS." Our lawyer urged us to build the strongest case possible. We gathered letters from our pediatrician confirming Nyla's allergy, a statement from Zach's employer about him working from home, screenshots proving Linda's connection to the CPS worker, even photos of the egging. The day before the hearing, I was helping Nyla tidy her crayons when I noticed one of her drawings. A tall figure labeled Big Mommy held a bottle that read magic drink. Next to her, a smaller figure labeled Mommy was crying. My heart froze. "Sweetheart, what's this picture?" Nyla looked up innocently. "Big Mommy said her magic drink will make me not allergic to peanuts anymore. But it tastes yucky and makes my tummy hurt." My blood turned to ice. "When did Big Mommy tell you this?" "Oh, at school," she said, like it was nothing. "She came for lunch. She told me it was our secret." I called Zach immediately. When he got home, we sat Nyla down gently. She told us Linda had been slipping into her school at lunch, pretending to be on the pickup list, whispering lies about me, and trying to feed her peanut products disguised as a cure. "Did you drink it?" Zach asked, his voice trembling. Nyla shook her head. "It smelled like the bad butter, the one that makes me itchy." I nearly collapsed with relief, but bile burned my throat. Linda wasn't just manipulative. She was reckless, dangerous. We called our lawyer and added every word to our case file. Court day came. Linda waltzed in wearing a conservative navy dress, clutching photo albums of Zach as a boy. She cried on cue, painting herself as a loving grandmother desperate for time with her granddaughter. She told the judge I was unstable, still suffering from postpartum depression, and accused me of inventing Nyla's allergy for attention. "I only brought peanut butter to test if the allergy was real," she said, dabbing fake tears. "So many mothers make these things up." Our lawyer presented everything. Medical proof of Nyla's allergy, screenshots tying Linda to the CPS worker, Mr. Peterson's statement about the egging, even Nyla's drawing of the so-called magic drink. The judge's face tightened with concern, but he didn't rule that day. Instead, he ordered a temporary compromise. Supervised visitation once a week under a court-appointed monitor. I wanted to scream. Linda had tried to poison my daughter, and now she was being rewarded with access. But at least it would be supervised. At least she couldn't get Nyla alone. The first visit was Saturday. The supervisor, Carla, was polite and professional. Linda, of course, was on her best behavior. Appropriate gifts, cheerful chatter, playing perfect grandma. But between smiles, she whispered little daggers. Grandma knows best. Mommy's rules are too strict. Afterward, Carla smiled at me. She clearly adores her granddaughter. I don't see any cause for concern. My heart sank. Linda had fooled her too. And I knew this battle was far from over. For 3 more weeks, the cycle repeated itself like clockwork. Every Saturday, Linda showed up with a saccharine smile and her bag of carefully chosen grandma gifts. In front of Carla, the court-appointed supervisor, she played the role of doting grandmother flawlessly. But I could see it. The sly digs, the whispers to Nyla, the way she looked at me with triumph hidden behind her fake warmth. After the 4th visit, Carla filed her report. She actually suggested that Linda's supervision requirement could be relaxed. Relaxed. My stomach turned to stone. Linda was winning. She was charming the system right out from under us. That night, once Nyla was tucked in and her bedroom was dark, I spread her drawings out across the kitchen table. Crayon figures stared back at me. Big Mommy with her magic drink. In one, Nyla had drawn herself covered in red spots with the words, "After drink," scrawled underneath. My blood ran cold. Linda was still at it, still trying to convince Nyla to ingest peanuts. This wasn't about visits. This wasn't even about control anymore. She was playing the long game. Earn trust, get rid of the supervisor, and then cure Nyla by giving her the one thing that could kill her. I realized children's drawings wouldn't be enough evidence in court. I needed something undeniable, so I hatched a plan: record her. The next weekend, when Linda dropped Nyla off, I brought up the magic drink, as casually as I could. "Oh, that's just a silly little game we play," Linda said with a dismissive wave. "Kids and their imagination." I kept my face neutral, my phone recording in my pocket. "She says you told her it would cure her peanut allergy." Linda's smile snapped like glass. "Maybe if you weren't so neurotic about every little thing, she wouldn't even have allergies. Children develop these things because their mothers coddle them. Allergies don't work that way," I said, my voice steady even though my heart was hammering. "Exposure could kill her." She rolled her eyes like I was an idiot. "One day you'll thank me for fixing your child. My Zach never had any of these so-called special needs. I raised him strong. If you'd let me spend more time with Nyla without your interference, I could build her tolerance. Kids today are weak because of mothers like you." That was it. That was the smoking gun. I cut the conversation short, rushed inside, and played the recording for Zach. His expression morphed from shock to pure rage. "We're ending this now," he growled, already dialing our lawyer. We filed for an emergency hearing immediately. In court, our lawyer played the recording, laid out Nyla's disturbing drawings, and reviewed all the evidence we'd compiled. The judge leaned forward, expression hard. "Mrs. Zachariah," he addressed Linda, his tone sharp enough to cut glass. "Are you telling this court you believe you can cure your granddaughter's life-threatening allergy by exposing her to peanuts?" Linda stammered, backpedaling, claiming she'd been misunderstood. But the damage was done. The judge's face hardened further. He suspended all visitation effective immediately and ordered a full psychological evaluation before any future contact could even be considered. As we walked out of the courthouse, Linda exploded. She trailed us into the parking lot, screaming about her rights as a grandmother. Her voice was shrill, echoing off the brick walls. People stopped to watch, including one of the moms from Nyla's old preschool. I saw the exact moment recognition hit her face. She saw the unhinged side of Linda that I had been trying to warn everyone about. The very next day, that mom texted me, "I think I owe you an apology. I believed some things I heard that weren't true. Now I see what's really going on." It was a small victory, but to me it felt monumental. Slowly, the tide was shifting. Word began to spread about Linda's behavior and the court's decision. Other parents who had distanced themselves from me started reaching out, offering support. For the first time in weeks, I felt like maybe, just maybe, we weren't alone in this anymore. That night, as I tucked Nyla into bed, she looked up at me with her big brown eyes and asked a question that shattered me. "Mommy, is Big Mommy mad at me because I'm broken?" I pulled her close, holding her tiny body against my chest, fighting the lump in my throat. "You are not broken, baby. You are perfect exactly the way you are. Big Mommy is just confused. That's why she can't come right now." "Will she get unconfused?" Nyla mumbled sleepily, her eyelids already drooping. "I don't know," I admitted, brushing her hair back gently. "But what I do know is that Daddy and I will always keep you safe. That's our most important job." I sat beside her until her breathing steadied, then whispered another promise into the dark. "I will protect you. Not just from the peanuts, not just from danger, but from ever believing you're broken." The next morning, I woke with a fire in my chest. This wasn't just about shielding Nyla anymore. It was about making sure Linda never had a chance to manipulate us again. I started with Nyla's old preschool. I explained everything, the lunches, the fake magic drink, the impersonation. The director went pale. They combed through their records and realized Linda had been using my ID number in their system, pretending to be me. They promised to implement photo verification going forward. Then I reached out to the parents who had witnessed Linda's courthouse meltdown. To my surprise, they rallied behind me. One mom confessed she'd been receiving anonymous emails trashing me, all from an address suspiciously similar to Linda's. She created a whole fake identity just to smear you, the mom said, her voice full of guilt. I should have questioned it. Piece by piece, the puzzle came together. Linda had been systematically isolating us, poisoning every well of support, all while painting herself as the savior. It was calculated. It was terrifying. But now, people were finally seeing the truth. The next few days passed in eerie silence. No calls, no voicemails, no strange cars lurking outside. Zach thought maybe she'd gotten the message, but I shook my head, my gut twisting. This doesn't feel like surrender, I told him. This feels like regrouping. And deep down, I knew we hadn't seen the last of her. I knew I was right. Linda wasn't done. 3 days after things had gone quiet, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. Thought you should see this. Linda's been telling everyone you're mentally unstable. Attached was a screenshot from a private local mom group. There it was in black and white. A fake account called Sarah's Concerned Friends spreading vile lies about me. Stories about me having episodes. Being dangerous, unfit. I showed Zach. His face darkened immediately. He started pacing the kitchen, phone clutched in his hand. Can we get a restraining order for online harassment? He demanded when he called our lawyer. The lawyer explained we'd need proof it was actually Linda behind the account. That's when I made my move. I created my own fake profile, slipped into the mom group, and messaged Sarah's concerned friend. I dangled bait. I have some information about the Thompsons that might interest you. She fell for it instantly. I'm actually Nyla's grandmother, she typed. I'm trying to protect her from her unstable mother. What do you have? My fingers shook as I took screenshots of everything. I sent them straight to our lawyer. He wasted no time filing for an emergency restraining order. The judge granted it temporarily, pending a full hearing in 2 weeks. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe, but it didn't erase the fear. Linda didn't respect laws, or boundaries, or basic decency. So I doubled down. We added motion sensor lights outside, checked every lock twice a day, and kept Nyla glued to us like a shadow. A week later, I braved the grocery store with Nyla. In the cereal aisle, I heard my name. I spun around, ready for a fight, but it was Catherine, one of the moms from Nyla's old preschool. My instinct was to grab Nyla and run, but Catherine looked nervous, apologetic. Hey, I just wanted to say I'm sorry, she said, twisting her shopping list in her hands. I should have asked you directly instead of believing rumors. I studied her face, wary. It's been a hard time, I bet. She leaned closer. Look, you should know something. Linda came to our book club last week. She didn't realize I was friends with Megan, the one who saw her meltdown at court. Linda told everyone you had Munchausen by proxy, that you were making up Nyla's allergy. My blood turned to ice. Catherine rushed to add. Megan called her out and Linda went ballistic, screaming about how everyone's against her, how she's going to save Nyla no matter what. Honestly, it was scary. I thanked her and got out of there as fast as possible, pushing my cart like it was on fire. At home, I told Zach everything. He immediately called our lawyer to update him. The day of the restraining order hearing arrived. My nerves buzzed like static. We packed every piece of evidence. Screenshots of Linda admitting she was behind the fake account, witness statements, Nyla's drawings, the recording of Linda ranting about curing her, and now Catherine's written statement from the book club. We got to the courthouse early. Our lawyer met us in the lobby, confident. The judge will take this seriously. Threats to children always tip the scale. Linda swept in just before the session started. Conservative gray dress, hair pulled into a severe bun. Her whole look screaming, respectable grandmother. Beside her, a slick lawyer in a designer suit kept glancing at his watch like he had dinner reservations. The hearing began. Our lawyer laid out the evidence calmly, piece by piece. The judge listened intently, his brow furrowing deeper with every detail. When the audio recording of Linda describing her plan to fix Nyla with peanuts played, the judge's jaw clenched. Then it was Linda's turn. Her lawyer tried to spin a fantasy. Linda as the loving grandmother, me as the unstable mother with a vendetta. Your Honor, my client has never given her granddaughter peanut products, he said smoothly. These allegations are fabricated by a mother who uses her daughter's supposed allergy as a tool for control. In fact, Mrs. Thompson herself has a history of anxiety and depression. I felt Zach stiffen beside me. That was the lowest of blows. Yes, I'd seen a therapist after Nyla's birth, for mild postpartum anxiety, completely normal. But to twist it into a weapon against me, my fists curled under the table. Our lawyer objected, and the judge agreed. My mental health was irrelevant. Then Linda took the stand. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, voice trembling. I just want what's best for my granddaughter. I've never tried to harm her. I only questioned whether her allergy was being managed properly. Our lawyer cut through her act. Mrs. Zachariah, in your own words, you said you wanted to fix your granddaughter by exposing her to peanuts. How do you explain that? For a split second, her mask slipped. Her face hardened. Then she smoothed it out again. I was frustrated, speaking metaphorically. I would never actually give her peanuts. And the magic drink you described to Nyla, the one she said smelled like peanut butter? Linda forced a laugh. A silly game. Children love make-believe. That's when our lawyer played his trump card. A credit card receipt showing Linda had purchased peanut butter the day before her supervised visit with Nyla. Can you explain why you bought this item, knowing your granddaughter has a life-threatening allergy to it? Linda stammered. I eat peanut butter myself. It had nothing to do with her. Our lawyer didn't let go. Yet Nyla described the drink you offered her as smelling like the bad butter that makes her sick. Her words, not ours. And that's when Linda snapped. She needs to build up tolerance, she shouted. Allergies are because parents coddle their kids. When I raised Zach, we didn't have these special snowflake conditions. The courtroom went silent. Even her lawyer froze, his jaw slack. And for the first time, I saw it, the exact moment Linda's perfect mask shattered in front of the judge. The judge called for a brief recess. Linda's lawyer practically dragged her to the corner of the courtroom, whispering sharp and frantic, his hand gripping her elbow like he was trying to physically hold her together. When they returned, Linda's face was pale but tight, like a mask stretched too thin. The judge didn't waste a second. His voice was steady, commanding. Based on the evidence presented, I am granting a permanent restraining order prohibiting Linda Zachariah from contacting Sarah Thompson, Zachary Thompson, or Nyla Thompson in any way. This includes in person, by phone, email, social media, or through third parties. Mrs. Zachariah is to remain at least 500 feet away from the Thompson family's home, Nyla's school, and any other location where they are present. Tears stung my eyes before I even realized I was crying. The judge continued, his gaze cutting like steel. Furthermore, I am ordering Mrs. Zachariah to undergo a psychological evaluation before any reconsideration of this order can take place. This court takes threats to children very seriously, especially when those threats come from family members who should be protecting them. Linda shot to her feet, her face twisted with fury. This is ridiculous. She's poisoned my son against me. She's poisoning my granddaughter against me. Mrs. Zachariah, the judge snapped. Control yourself, or you will be held in contempt. Her lawyer yanked on her sleeve, hissing something in her ear. She sat back down, still seething, but for once, silent. When it was over, we walked out into the bright sunlight like new people. My shoulders felt 10 pounds lighter. For the first time in months, I could breathe without fear pressing down on my chest. Zach looked relieved too, though his expression carried a quiet sorrow. I never thought it would come to this, he murmured as we walked to the car. I squeezed his hand. I'm sorry it had to be this way. I really did try with her. He stopped, meeting my eyes. This isn't on you. She made her choices. We picked up Nyla from my friend Anna's house. She came running across the yard with her curls flying and a crayon drawing clutched in her hand. Look what I made, she shouted. It was a picture of the three of us standing in front of our house, all of us smiling. Just us, just family. That night, after Nyla fell asleep, Zach and I sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes and the silence of relief. I think we should move, he said. Not far, just somewhere new. A fresh start. I nodded. And a new preschool for Nyla, somewhere safe. Within weeks, we found a house in a neighboring town. The kitchen was bigger, perfect for preparing allergy-safe meals. Nyla's new room had soft pink walls and space for all her stuffed animals. The preschool had excellent security and staff who actually understood severe allergies. And this time, we only shared our address with people we trusted completely. Moving day was chaos, but when the doorbell rang and Zach checked the security camera, his face relaxed. It's just the neighbors. I opened the door to meet David and Rose, a kind couple with a little boy close to Nyla's age. They held out a welcome basket, smiling warmly. On top was a handwritten note. We heard you have a peanut allergy in the family. Everything in here is nut-free. My throat tightened. After months of suspicion and hostility, their thoughtfulness nearly broke me. We invited them in for coffee while the kids played, and for the first time in forever, it felt normal. Over the next few months, Nyla bloomed. She adored her new teacher, Miss Campbell. She made friends quickly, and for once, she wasn't the kid with the allergy. She was just Nyla, and everyone around her took her safety seriously. Through the grapevine, Zach's cousin told us Linda had been telling people we'd moved to Alaska. We let her keep spinning that story. The further away she imagined us, the better. At a local moms group, I met Christine, who casually mentioned she'd lived in our old town. Do you know a woman named Linda Zachariah? She asked. My stomach dropped. Why do you ask? Christine sighed. She was banned from seeing my sister's kids years ago. Same stuff. Undermining parenting, ignoring allergies, trying to turn the kids against their mom. I wondered if you'd ever run into her. My jaw nearly hit the floor. She's my mother-in-law. We moved here to get away from her. Christine just nodded knowingly. You're not the first. My sister moved all the way to Colorado because of her. It was strange, comforting in a way to know it wasn't us. That Linda's poison wasn't unique to our family. But it was heartbreaking too. How many children had she put in danger before Nyla? 6 months later, we celebrated Nyla's 5th birthday in our new home. Pink balloons floated against the ceiling, and I baked a nut-free cake myself. Her laughter filled the house as she played with her new friends. No drama, no emergencies, no Linda. That night, after the kids went home and Nyla curled up with her new stuffed unicorn, Zach and I sat on the back porch with glasses of wine. The night sky was clear, stars scattered like promises. "We did it," I whispered, clinking my glass against his. He wrapped an arm around me. "We sure did, and we always will." I leaned into him, breathing in the cool night air, letting the peace sink in. Linda was finally out of our lives for good.
Thanks for watching. Today's train wreck is over, but tomorrow's ride is already on track. Subscribe so you don't miss it.